The shuttle rattled as it pierced the upper atmosphere of Naratus, flames sliding in ribbons across the viewport before vanishing into the star-dotted black. Commander Arthur Hansen adjusted the seals on his combat suit, the titanium alloy plates, responding with subtle hisses as the microservos recalibrated for the planet's heavier gravity. A thin sheen of perspiration clung to his neck despite the internal climate control. He reminded himself again not to remove the filtration module. The station AI's warning still echoed in his ear. Breathable atmosphere of local microbes will make you regret it. Elysian Station spread below, a shimmering sprawl of silver latticework fused with structures that seemed to breathe. Bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly along organic curves of living metal, as though the city itself was a vast organism. It was breathtaking in its strangeness. He had studied hundreds of files, watched hours of surveillance, and yet none of it matched the visceral impact of seeing Arathis' hub of power with his own eyes. He told himself to keep his guard up. Rumors of bioweapons, secret programs, and broken trees had brought him here, but a part of him couldn't help but marvel. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad lit by oscillating rings of pale blue light. The moment his boots struck the deck, he felt the extra weight tug at his body. The suit compensated, but his muscles remembered the difference. A memory rose unbidden. His childhood retriever, Samson, bounding across the backfield on Earth. The dog had been old, heavy with years, yet had still carried joy in every step. Arthur blinked it away. Strange how, in alien worlds, the mind reached for something familiar to steady itself. Around him, Narathosians moved with liquid grace, their tall frames shifting like dancers in perfect gravity. Most avoided looking directly at him, their pale eyes flickering sideways with an undercurrent of disdain. Humans were newcomers, raw metal hammered into shape too quickly, still smelling of smoke and fire. Arthur squared his shoulders, forcing himself to return each curious glance with the calm steel of a soldier who had nothing to prove. A voice, melodic and controlled, cut through the station din. Commander Hansen, he turned. The woman approaching was unlike any file photo he'd seen. Her skin gleamed in shades of deep blue, etched with threads of living light that shifted like constellations across her body. A braid of silver-white hair coiled over one shoulder, catching the glow of the docking bay lamps. Her bodysuit, sleek black and navy, was cut for motion rather than modesty, and she moved as though every stride had been rehearsed for centuries. Her eyes large, white-irised, faintly luminous, measured him without a flicker of warmth. "I am Liaison Era Invari," she said, inclining her head in a formal bow instead of offering her hand. "I have been assigned to facilitate your inspection of our biological research facilities." Arthur returned the bow with military precision, though the gesture felt stiff in his frame. "Commander Arthur Hansen, Galactic Alliance Security Council. I appreciate your guidance." Her gaze did not soften. "You will find that the High Council has extended considerable generosity in granting you access. All facilities are open to you, save the sacred temples. I trust your visit will be brief and uneventful." The emphasis was deliberate, a velvet cloaked warning. Arthur caught it and offered a faint smile. "I hope for the same." She studied him, and for a moment the glow along her skin flickered, like light against unsettled waters. Perhaps amusement, perhaps annoyance. Whatever it was, she hid it quickly, gesturing toward a waiting transport platform. As they walked, Arthur felt the weight of her silence, more than the pull of gravity. The air between them was charged, not hostile exactly, but skeptical-like. The moment before an animal decides whether you're friend or predator. He remembered Samson again, how the old dog had once stood bristling between him and a neighbor's stray, eyes locked in judgment, until Arthur knelt, offering an open hand. Trust had been earned in that breathless pause. Arthur glanced at Era Ingvari. He suspected this encounter would follow a similar path. The Narathosians might see humanity as reckless children, dangerous and unrefined. But he knew patience and kindness were sometimes sharper weapons than blades. The transport's doors opened with a hiss. As they stepped inside, her voice finally broke the silence. "Tell me, Commander, do you truly believe your species is ready to stand as equals among civilizations that were mapping the stars before you lit your first fire?" Arthur met her luminous eyes steadily, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And yet, here I am, standing beside you. Maybe the fire burns brighter for being new." Her expression didn't change, but something subtle flickered in the glow of her skin. And for the first time, Arthur felt the faintest spark of possibility. Out the transport platform glided soundlessly above the sprawling alien city, its surface smooth beneath Arthur's boots, as if it were cut from glass. Below stretched Nerathuses, capital towering spires that seemed grown rather than built, latticed with veins of living metal and threaded by rivers that glowed faintly in the twilight. Through transparent tubes that crisscrossed the skyline, streams of Narathosians swam and strode with effortless grace, their bodies moving in synchronized rhythm as if the entire city pulsed with a single heartbeat. Arthur leaned slightly against the railing, not to steady himself, but to observe without craning like a tourist. Even so, he felt Era's eyes on him, assessing, perhaps judging. "Remarkable," he said at last, keeping his voice neutral. "Your people have achieved a harmony of technology and biology that the Alliance has only begun to imagine." Her head tilted a fraction, silver braid catching the artificial light. "We have had 50,000 years to perfect it, Commander. Humanity has had, how many? 70 years since your first stumbling voyage beyond your home star?" The words were neither cruel nor mocking, merely factual, but they carried an edge all the same. Arthur kept his expression relaxed, hands folded casually behind his back. 70 years, he confirmed. "But in that span, we went from isolation to standing here beside you, speaking as representatives of the same alliance. Some would call that progress. Some would call it arrogance." Her luminescent eyes narrowed. "Do you believe yourselves truly equal? Or is this visit merely another attempt to measure what you do not yet understand?" Arthur allowed a small, disarming smile. "If we understood everything already, I'd be out of a job." For the first time, a ripple of color moved along the glowing lines across her skin, quick, sharp, then subdued. Amusement? Irritation? He wasn't yet sure. But the fact that his words drew any reaction at all felt like a small victory. Platform banked left, descending toward a massive complex half submerged in a lake that shimmered with iridescent hues. The water reflected the twin moons now beginning to crest the horizon, painting the scene in silver and blue. But the facility itself stood in stark contrast to the elegance of the city-high security walls bristling with weapon turrets. Guards at every checkpoint, their four-fingered hands resting on pulse rifles. "This is the Aquatic Research Division," Era said, her tone formal again, erasing the flicker of warmth. "It was not originally on your itinerary. However, circumstances require verification by an outside observer." Arthur straightened, instincts sharpening. "What kind of circumstances?" "A containment issue," she replied, too smoothly, too vague. "The High Council believes your presence will prevent misinterpretations." The platform touched down. Immediately, the air grew taut with tension. Guards saluted Era, but kept their eyes fixed warily on Arthur, the alien outsider in their midst. The weight of their suspicion pressed heavier than gravity. They passed through layered checkpoints, each more invasive than the last biometric scans, energy sweeps, questions in clipped Narathosian dialects that Era translated without elaboration. By the time they reached the inner chamber, Arthur's pulse had steadied into the calm rhythm of a soldier anticipating conflict. The chamber ceiling soared 50 feet high, its walls reinforced with shimmering containment fields. In the center stood a cage no more than a cage, a prison of technology and energy woven together into a humming lattice. Inside, the specimen waited. Arthur's breath caught despite himself. The creature was immense, coiled serpentine muscles beneath scales that shifted from azure to teal with each restless twitch. Fins curled like sails against its body, and its eyes, massive yellow-green orbs, tracked their every movement with unsettling precision. A low rumble echoed from its chest, vibrating through the floor. "What in God's name is that?" Arthur murmured. "A leviathan," Era said quietly, standing beside him but keeping her distance. Her luminous patterns dimmed, as though in instinctive respect or fear. "An apex predator from our southern oceans. This one was captured. For research, it has proven unmanageable." Arthur studied the beast. It thrashed once against its restraints, sending a shiver through the air, and several scientists flinched back in alarm. But what Arthur saw was not blind fury. The movements were frantic, desperate. "Not attack plea. Research," he echoed. "On what?" "Adaptations to extreme pressure environments," another voice cut in. A man in elaborate robes approached, skin a deeper shade of blue than Era's. His posture radiated authority, but his eyes did not meet Arthur's until the last moment. "I am Director Thalas. You are the Alliance witness, I presume?" Arthur inclined his head. "Commander Arthur Hansen." Thalas sniffed, then gestured sharply toward the cage. "This beast killed 2 of our handlers. The High Council has ordered its termination at dawn. You will observe so that no questions arise about our research." Arthur's gaze returned to the Leviathan. Those vast alien eyes locked onto him, and something in their depth made his chest tighten. Not rage, not hunger, fear. "Tell me," Arthur said slowly, "when was the last time anyone tried to feed it?" The silence that followed told him. More than any answer could. Night on Elysium Station wrapped the alien city in soft shades of violet and silver. The twin moons of Naradas hung heavy beyond the dome, their pale light filtering through bioengineered structures that seemed to breathe as they slept. Most of the station's corridors were hushed now, only the muted thrum of ventilation and distant footsteps breaking the stillness. Commander Arthur Hansen moved carefully through the shadows, his combat suit set to low output to avoid unnecessary noise. Every step felt heavier than it should have, not from gravity, but from the weight of what he had seen. The Leviathan haunted his thoughts. The way its scales shimmered, the way its eyes had fixed on him, not with the blind violence of a predator, but with something uncomfortably close to recognition. He had seen it before in Samson's eyes, when the old dog lay trembling after fireworks, flinching from a world it couldn't understand. The same quiet plea, silent but undeniable. "Don't hurt me, just help." Arthur tightened the strap on. His utility pouch, checking again that the chocolate protein bar was secure. A foolish plan, perhaps. But sometimes the foolish ones were the only ones that mattered. A soft chime broke his focus. His door slid open before he reached it. Era Inveri stepped inside without waiting for invitation, her bioluminescent patterns glowing brighter in the dim light. She was no longer in her formal liaison uniform. Instead, she wore a fitted suit designed for mobility, its sleek lines accentuating the fluidity of her movements. "I knew you would try something reckless," she said, her voice low but not unkind. Arthur arched an eyebrow. "Come to stop me?" Her luminous eyes studied him, calculating. "No, I'm coming with you." That caught him. Why the sudden change of heart? Era hesitated, her patterns flickering in quick, uncertain pulses. Something about this situation is wrong. The authorization for capturing a Leviathan was irregular. Terminating it so quickly conveniently timed with your visit smells of politics, not science. I've had doubts for years about what our researchers are doing. You pushed them to the surface. Arthur gave her a wry smile. Humans have that effect. Reckless honesty, irritating questions, poor timing, it's practically our brand. For a moment, something like amusement crossed her face. Then she straightened, regaining her professional edge. We will have to move quickly. Security patrols shift every 90 minutes. The next window is now. They slipped into the service corridors, avoiding the main arterial routes where guards stood at rigid attention. Aira moved like liquid shadow, disabling scanners with a flick of her wrist, keying access codes into panels with effortless precision. Arthur followed close, keeping his own systems ready, but letting her guide the way. You've done this before, he murmured as they bypassed a biometric lock. Her expression was unreadable. I've had reasons to study how our systems can be circumvented. I never acted on them, until now. Arthur risked a glance at her. The glow along her skin patterns was faster, brighter. What changed? You did, she said simply, eyes flicking toward him before returning to the path ahead. Your refusal to accept the obvious truth. Your willingness to see more than what you were told. It's refreshing. His chest tightened at the candor in her voice, though he covered it with a crooked grin. Careful, Aira. You sound dangerously close to calling me inspiring. The glow of her patterns deepened, and Arthur realized it might be the Narathosian equivalent of a blush. Don't let it go to your head, human. They reached the outer ring of the research facility, the hum of containment fields vibrating faintly through the walls. The chamber holding the Leviathan loomed beyond the next security door. Arthur paused, steadying himself, the memory of those vast eyes pulling at him. Aira keyed the override, her slender fingers dancing across the alien interface. The lock disengaged with a soft hiss. She glanced back at him, her voice barely a whisper. Once we step through, there is no going back. We will both be branded traitors. Arthur met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Some things are worth the risk. The door slid open, spilling pale blue light across their faces. The chamber lay before them, vast and humming, and at its center the Leviathan stirred, lifting its head as if it had been waiting for them all along. The chamber smelled faintly of ozone and salt, as though some fragment of an alien sea had been dragged inside. Emergency lights traced pale blue arcs along the walls, throwing long shadows that twitched with each flicker of the containment field. At the center, the Leviathan lifted its massive head, scales shimmering like liquid sapphire. Its yellow-green eyes locked on Arthur and Aira the moment they crossed the threshold. Arthur felt Aira's tension ripple beside him. Her bioluminescent lines pulsed quick and uneven, betraying emotions her face refused to show. It knows we're here, she murmured, voice almost reverent. That makes two of us, Arthur replied softly, his throat dry. He approached the cage slowly, every step deliberate. The creature's fins shifted, flexing against the restraints. The sound a low, resonant groan of metal under strain made. The scientists who had stayed behind flinch and scatter to the edges of the chamber. But Arthur kept walking. Easy, big guy, he whispered, reaching into his pouch. He withdrew the chocolate protein bar, peeling the wrapper with careful fingers. The faint sweet scent seemed out of place amid the sterile tang of machinery. He held it up where the Leviathan could see, then extended it through the gap between the bars. Aira hissed under her breath. Arthur, that's insane. It killed trained handlers. Or maybe it didn't, Arthur countered, eyes never leaving the beast. The Leviathan's nostrils flared. It shifted forward with a sudden surge of power that made Era step back in alarm. But the movement stopped short, delicate, almost gentle, as a specialized feeding appendage extended from beneath its jaw. With surprising care, it plucked the bar from Arthur's hand. A single flex of its muscles, and the chocolate was gone. The creature rumbled, the sound so deep it vibrated through Arthur's chest. He felt it not as a threat, but as something closer to contentment. "I think he likes it," Arthur said with a small grin. Era stood frozen, disbelief etched across her features. Impossible. Leviathans don't bond. They don't even tolerate other species. Guess no one ever tried giving them candy before, Arthur murmured, his hand still outstretched. On instinct, he reached further, brushing his gloved fingers against the creature's scaled head. The texture was smooth and warm, alive with a subtle pulse that reminded him of Ira's glowing patterns. Instead of recoiling, the Leviathan leaned into his touch, eyelids lowering in something that looked eerily like pleasure. Arthur's throat tightened. He remembered Samson again, trembling under a thunderstorm until Arthur's hand had stilled him. That same trust-fragile, undeserved, but freely given shone in the Leviathan's eyes now. Era stepped closer despite herself, her shoulder brushing his arm. Her patterns flared brighter, betraying emotions her words barely contained. "The official report said the handlers were devoured," she whispered, voice trembling. "But I never saw the bodies. It was all very controlled." Arthur turned to her, suddenly aware of how near she stood. Her silver hair caught the chamber's glow, her luminous eyes wide, fixed not on the beast but on him. The air between them seemed charged, alive with more than danger. "We need to get him out of here," Arthur said, his voice low and rough. "That would be treason against the High Council," Era replied, but the conviction in her tone wavered. Her gaze flicked down to his lips before returning to his eyes, patterns pulsing rapid fire across her skin. "Not to mention dangerous, irrational." Arthur smiled faintly. "Welcome to humanity." The Leviathan rumbled again, louder this time, as though agreeing. Era exhaled, fingers trembling over the control panel. "Once I do this, there's no going back." Arthur's hand lingered on the creature's head, steady and sure. "Some things are worth the risk." Her eyes held his for a long heartbeat. Then she pressed the final command. The locks disengaged with a heavy clank. The containment field flickered and collapsed. For a breathless instant, there was nothing between them and the Leviathan but open air. The beast rose to its full, terrifying height, 20 feet of coiled muscle and radiant scales. Scientists screamed and bolted for the exits. Era's patterns flared in terror, but Arthur stood his ground, palm still raised in silent promise. The Leviathan lowered its head instead of striking, releasing a harmonious rumble that echoed through the chamber like a vow. And in that moment, Arthur knew they hadn't freed a monster. They had freed a guardian. The alarms shattered the silence a heartbeat later. "Security breach in Containment Sector 4, an automated voice barked. "All personnel, respond immediately." Arthur looked to Era. She was already moving toward him, eyes alight with both fear and something fiercer. "Now we run," he said. The Leviathan bent low, fins spread wide, as if inviting them onto its back. Ayra stared, aghast. "This is madness." Arthur extended his hand to her, a crook smile tugging at his lips. "Madness is what humans do best." And together, they climbed. The Leviathan surged forward with such explosive force that Arthur nearly lost his grip. Era's arms tightened instinctively around his waist, her cool skin vibrating faintly where her bioluminescent patterns pulsed against his back. The beast moved with astonishing agility, weaving through the labyrinthine chamber like a living current dot behind them. The containment doors blew open. Director Thalos strode through encased in a mechanized exosuit, its hydraulic limbs hissing. With power, security troopers fanned out in a crescent, weapons raised. "Stop them!" Thalos roared, his amplified voice rattling the walls. The specimen must not leave this facility. The Leviathan responded with a thunderous roar that shook the chamber's foundations. Energy rippled along its scales, building to a brilliant radiance. A beam of focused blue-white light burst from its maw, slamming into Thales's exosuit, and hurling the director backward in a cascade of sparks. Troopers scattered in terror. Hera's voice was a breathless whisper in Arthur's ear. "By the ancestral seas, it is a guardian." Arthur didn't have time to marvel. He leaned forward, guiding the creature with nothing but instinct. "Toward the lake." He shouted Dot as if it understood. The Leviathan twisted, barreling through a wall of transparent alloy. Glass-like fragments exploded outward in a dazzling spray. Arthur's suit shield absorbed the impact, protecting him and Hera as they burst. Into a vast atrium beneath the dome of Elysium Station, the night sky opened above them, twin moons glowing like watchful eyes. Below lay the iridescent waters that lapped against the research facility's outer walls. Alarms blared across the station. Pulsing red lights painted the architecture in violent hues. Security skimmers buzzed into motion, rising like hornets. Disturbed from their nest dot, the Leviathan coiled, then hurled itself forward. With a final thunderous crash, it tore through the reinforced barrier at the atrium's edge and plunged into the lake. The shock of cold, alien water hit Arthur like a physical blow, but his suit reacted instantly, sealing tighter and adjusting temperature. Behind him, Hera's gill-like vents flared open along her neck, her body perfectly adapted to the sudden submersion. The Leviathan cut through the depths like a torpedo, bioluminescent scales illuminating their path in ghostly azure streaks. Arthur clung tightly, feeling the beast's immense muscles ripple beneath him. Hera pressed close, her fingers laced with his, where they clutched the ridges of its spine dot above. Skimmer craft dropped searchlights that speared into the water. The Leviathan twisted sharply, using its massive body to slip between beams, diving deeper until the world was nothing but shifting colors and the muffled thunder of pursuit. They broke the surface on the far side of the lake, the research facility, now a fortress of light and alarm behind them. Arthur spotted the silhouette of his shuttle, still secured at the edge of a smaller docking platform. "There," he pointed. "That's our way out." The Leviathan surged toward it, parting the water with tidal force. As they neared, Arthur could feel the beast slowing, lowering itself as if offering them a gentler dismount. He slid off its back, boots splashing against the platform. He turned, palm resting briefly against the Leviathan's head. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more than he had ever meant words in his life. The creature's great eyes met his. One last time, then it released a low, resonant rumble before sinking back into the shimmering depths. Hera climbed up beside him, water streaming down her braid, plastering silver against blue skin. Her luminous patterns flared bright and fast as she looked back at the fading glow beneath the waves. "It stayed behind to protect us." Arthur didn't answer, though his chest ached with the same realization. He opened the shuttle ramp, urging her inside. Engines whined to life as he punched through the lockdown codes. Warning klaxons shrieked as the vessel rose. From the viewport, Arthur saw patrol ships lifting off from the capital, moving fast. 5 minutes until they're in range, Hera reported, her voice tight. Arthur gritted his teeth, fingers flying across the console. The shuttle angled skyward, breaking through the cloud layer into the star-specked void. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the hum of the engines. Hera exhaled, shoulders sagging against the co-pilot's seat. Her luminous eyes found his in the dim glow. "What happens now?" she asked. Arthur glanced at her, a half-smile curving his lips. Now we make our own rules. But before she could respond, the console flared red. Alert. Fuel cell integrity. Compromised. Emergency power conservation required. Arthur cursed under his breath, recalculating their dwindling odds. 6 hours of life support at best. Maybe 18 if they rationed everything. They were free. But adrift, wounded, and already hunted. And somewhere out there, the Guardians were waiting. The shuttle floated in the black like a wounded bird, systems dimmed to bare minimum, its hull still humming from the violence of escape. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than it should have, a box of shadows and low beeps where every breath seemed louder than the stars. Arthur stripped off his gauntlets, flexing fingers gone stiff from adrenaline, and forced himself to breathe evenly. 6 hours of full power, maybe 8 if they conserved. Not enough to make it back to Alliance space. Not without repairs. The nanites would need time, and time was a resource they were rapidly burning. Across from him, Era coiled into the co-pilot's seat, knees drawn up, her damp braid trailing over one shoulder. The luminescent lines along her skin pulsed softly, a rhythm more subdued now, though no less alive. He watched them in the dim cabin glow, fascinated. Your suit regulates temperature, she observed quietly, but your body still struggles, Arthur. Gave a dry laugh. We weren't built for cold, not like you. He reached into a supply locker, tossing her one of the thermal blankets. Better share, before I start shivering loud enough to wake half the fleet. She unwrapped the blanket, with a flick of her fingers, then shifted, sliding close. Her skin was cool against his warmth, but not unpleasant. Her scent something faintly mineral, like ocean stone after rain filled the cramped air. My people view proximity as function, she said softly, tucking the blanket around both of them. But with you, it feels different. Arthur. Let the silence stretch, her words sinking into him. He thought of Samson again, the dog pressing against him during storms, drawing comfort from contact. Different isn't always bad, he said at last. The shuttle's hum filled the quiet. Somewhere between the fatigue and the intimacy of shared breath, the conversation shifted. Era asked about Earth, about oceans and forests, crowded cities and quiet places. Arthur told her story's childhood summers on Lake Superior, the crash of surf on a rocky coast, the smell of pine after rain. In return, she spoke of Narathis' tidal plains, of myths older than human civilization. Guardians, she explained, had always been part of their stories, keepers of balance, protectors of oceans. But no one had seen one in living memory. Or legend, she said, her voice hushed. Until you touched one. Arthur shifted, meeting her luminous eyes. Not me. Us. You opened that cage with me. Her patterns brightened in quick succession. A blush if he was learning right. Perhaps. But you were the first to see more than a beast. The air between them tightened, charged. Her hand brushed his on the console, deliberate, her cool skin, sending a shiver up his arm. He didn't pull away. Then the console crackled, shattering the moment. A new signal blinked across the display, a faint harmonic pattern, pulsing at irregular intervals. Arthur frowned, leaning forward. That's not a standard distress code. Era's eyes widened, her patterns flaring in sudden alarm. It's a Guardian frequency, the same resonance we heard in the containment chamber. Arthur's pulse spiked. Another one. Her fingers flew across the controls, tracing the source. A Narathosian prison transport. 2 hours away. Surrounded by unidentified vessels. Pirates. The tactical display confirmed its sleek ships swarming like predators around a lumbering transport, weapons fire flashing in the dark. The distress signal pulsed again. Desperate, unmistakable. Arthur's. Jaw tightened. They've got another Guardian. Maybe more. Era's glow dimmed. her voice low. "If they are transporting guardians, there could be eggs." A chill lanced through Arthur, sharper than any cold. Eggs meant a future, a species reborn. And now pirates were tearing it apart. Her hand found his, luminous eyes steady. "We're low on power, outnumbered, outgunned. To intervene would be suicide." Arthur squeezed her fingers. "Yeah." He gave a faint grin, the kind she had already learned meant trouble. "But if we don't, who else will?" The shuttle's engines growled back to life as he diverted precious energy to propulsion dot in the viewport. The stars shifted, aligning into a course that led straight into danger. The pirate vessels swarmed the Narathosian transport like carrion. Birds, sleek hulls bristling with mismatched weapons. The transport's shields flickered, blue energy bleeding into black space with every impact. Arthur guided the shuttle into the shadow of the transport's engine array, the radiation masking their presence. Inside the cramped cockpit, the air tasted of metal and tension. Era leaned over the console, her patterns flashing with urgency. "The Guardian is being held in the central containment." But her voice caught, her glowing eyes widening. "There are eggs. Dozens." Arthur's chest tightened. He thought of the Leviathan's eyes, the way it had leaned into his hand like Samson had all those years ago. Not just a beast, but a parent. Not a weapon, but a life. Before he could speak, the cum crackled with a voice Arthur knew too well. "This is Commander Thomas Vance. Pirates, your payday grows if you deliver the Guardian and its brood intact. Kill the rest." Arthur froze. Vance, once an Alliance operator, now a mercenary, selling out to the highest bidder. Arthur felt Era's gaze on him, reading the rage simmering beneath his calm. "You know him," she whispered. Arthur's jaw clenched. Too well. The cum cut to another voice harsh, reptilian. "Your shields are failing, Narathosian. Surrender the specimens." Inside the transport, chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Energy blasts shook the hull. Arthur punched the shuttle into motion, docking at a maintenance airlock beneath the firefight. They slipped inside, weapons drawn. The corridors were smoke-choked and littered with bodies. Narathosian guards lay crumpled where they'd fallen, their weapons still glowing from last discharge. Pirates stalked the halls, their armor scarred and their eyes cold. Arthur and Era moved as one. His pulse rifle barked precise bursts. Her blade shimmered in arcs of light. They carved a path down toward the heart of the ship where the Guardians were caged out at the command deck junction. Arthur broke away. "I'll take Vance. You get the eggs." Era's hand caught his wrist, her patterns bright and fierce. "Be careful. He knows you." "And I know him," Arthur said, touching her cheek with a fleeting gentleness before pulling away. The command deck was a war zone. Pirates cut through reinforced doors while Narathosian officers held a desperate line. And in the center stood Vance, calm amid chaos, downloading data with the mercenaries' detachment. "Hello, Arthur," he drawled when the door slid open. "Still chasing lost causes?" Arthur leveled his rifle. "Guardians aren't lost causes. They're lives." Vance smirked. "Lives? No, Hanson. They're power. Whoever controls them controls the future." Before Arthur could reply, the ship shuddered violently. Reactor breach alarms shrieked. They had minutes, maybe less, down in containment. Ira found the Guardian massive, radiant, coiled protectively around a clutch of eggs that glowed with embryonic light. Pirates circled, weapons raised. She raised her voice, desperate. "Arthur, they're going to fire." Then he was there, bursting through the breach, rifle spitting fire. Pirates fell, but more surged forward. Arthur holstered his weapon, stepping toward the Guardian with empty hands. "Easy," he whispered. pulling the last chocolate bar from his pouch. He tore it open and held it out. The guardian's nostrils flared. With infinite care, it plucked the offering away. A low, resonant rumble filled the chamber. Trust. Recognition. Arthur placed his palm on its head. They're not weapons. They're protectors. The pirates faltered, unnerved by the sight. Their leader snarled and raised his blaster only, to be cut down by Vance, appearing at Arthur's side. Smoke curled from his weapon. "Still too noble for your own good," Vance muttered. "Now move, or we all die here." Together they loaded the eggs into biopods designed for heavy specimens. The Guardian helped, cradling each one with tenderness that silenced every doubt in Aira's heart. 30 seconds to detonation. Arthur shoved the last pod into its launch tube. "Someone has to trigger manual release," Aira warned. "I'll do it," Vance said, already moving to the console. He glanced back once, that old sardonic grin etched on his face. "Get them out. Don't waste this." A pod launched with a thunderous jolt, carrying the Guardian and its brood clear. A second later, the transport tore itself apart in a sun-bright explosion. Silence. Then the tracking screen lit up. 2 pods, not 1. Vance had launched himself clear in the last instant. 3 months later, a sanctuary sprawled across a neutral moon, seas engineered to mimic Arathis' tides. Guardians swam free, their young learning to shape energy not as weapons, but as balance. Arthur stood with Aira on the observation deck, her glowing patterns flowing in gentle waves across her skin. "Magnificent," she whispered, leaning against him. "Worth every risk," he said. Behind them, Vance approached in a new Uniform Alliance diplomatic course. He smirked. "The press wants to hear about the human who tamed a monster with chocolate." Arthur groaned, but Aira's laugh rippled like music dot in the sanctuary's glow. With guardians singing their harmonic resonance below, Arthur realized the galaxy had shifted. Not by power, not by conquest, but by the simple audacity to be gentle dot. And for that, the Narathosians gave him a name. Vetor, the gentle hand.